The war ended with silence instead of celebration. Human soldier Elias Vaughn stood in the crystalline chamber of the Aurelian Concorde, armor scorched, pulse steady, eyes lifted toward judges who glowed like living constellations. The female alien tribunal ruled worlds older than Earth itself, their voices harmonizing through the hall like calm thunder. Elias had been captured during a joint defense, not as a criminal, but as a survivor. His unit had held a breach long enough for an alien evacuation, sacrificing everything. The Aurelians called it valor beyond probability. The presiding matriarch Seraphil spoke, gently yet with absolute authority. Human Elias Vaughn, your biology carries adaptive resilience rare among our kind. Our species faces decline after centuries of sterile peace. Elias felt the weight of unfamiliar words settle on his shoulders. He had expected imprisonment or release, not destiny. The court continued, explaining that Aurelian females could only conceive with partners whose neural rhythms synchronized with their life energy. Few males of their own kind remained capable. Fewer still survived the long wars. Humans had never been considered until Elias touched a wounded Aurelian princess on the battlefield and stabilized her with nothing but presence and instinct. The court order was clear. Elias would remain among them as a bonded consort. He would mate with selected adult Aurelian females under sacred law. There was no threat in their tone, only solemn necessity. Elias swallowed and nodded, a soldier trained to accept orders larger than himself. Yet this was not a battlefield, it was a future. As the chamber lights dimmed, Seraphil added one final truth. You will not be a prisoner, you will be honored, protected, and free to refuse any bond not freely given. Consent is the foundation of life. For the first time since the war, Elias exhaled fully. The Aurelian city floated above a violet ocean, towers grown rather than built. Elias walked beneath arching lights, guided by Lyra, a cultural liaison chosen to help him adapt. Lyra was tall, her skin shimmering like dawn glass, her expression curious rather than cold. You are afraid we will treat you as a resource, she said softly. But you are not an object here. She explained the bond ritual was not an act of dominance, but mutual alignment. Mating among Aurelians required trust, emotional resonance, and shared purpose. Without those, conception was impossible. Elias listened more than he spoke. On Earth he had been a weapon, here he was something else. A bridge. The first female he met was council scholar Malith. Older than most by centuries, yet vibrant, her eyes held galaxies of patience. She studied Elias not with hunger, but with respect. We do not rush life, Malith said. If we bond, it will be because we choose to walk together. Days passed, filled with learning rather than expectation. Elias trained in meditation chambers, synchronizing breath with Aurelian energy fields. The connection felt less physical and more like standing in warm sunlight. Slowly fear gave way to wonder. The court order no longer felt like a sentence, but an invitation. The bonding sanctuary rested at the heart of the city. Bioluminescent petals opened as Elias entered with Malith beside him. There were no crowds, no spectacle. Only silence, warmth, and shared intention. Malith placed her hand against Elias' chest. He mirrored the gesture, feeling a hum spread between them. Memories surfaced not as images, but emotions, loss, hope, endurance. The union was not described in motions, but in presence. Two beings aligning their life rhythms. Energy braided gently, respectfully. When it ended, both stood unchanged, yet profoundly different. Malith smiled, a rare and private expression. The bond has taken. News spread quietly through the city. For the first time in generations, new life potential had been confirmed. Not through conquest, but cooperation. Elias felt pride without ownership. He had given nothing that was taken, only shared what he already was. Maori females came forward over time. Each bond preceded by conversation, shared meals, and choice. Elias was never ordered again, only asked. Some he declined, sensing misalignment. The court honored every refusal. Trust deepened. Elias became more than a soldier or consort. He advised on human perspectives, conflict resolution, and courage under loss. The Aurelians listened. Lyra once asked if he missed Earth. He answered honestly, "I miss who I was there, but I am becoming someone new here." The court observed that births increased slowly but steadily. Hybrid children carried traits of both worlds. Resilient, luminous, curious. Years passed, marked by starlight rather than calendars. Elias stood once more before the tribunal, this time by invitation. Seraphil addressed him not as subject, but as equal. "You changed the course of our people, not by force, but by consent and compassion." Elias responded with humility. "I only followed the same rule I learned in war: protect life." The court proposed a new accord between Earth and the Concord, an alliance founded on shared survival, not fear. As Elias walked through the city that night, children played beneath glowing arches. Some with human eyes, others with Aurelian light, all laughing the same. The order that once frightened him had become a story of unity. Not about mating, but about choosing to stand together. And among the stars, two civilizations learned that the strongest bonds are never forced. The stars shifted over the Aurelian city as if listening. Elias stood on a living balcony grown from crystal vine, watching light ripple across the ocean below. He felt older now, not in years, but in layers, shaped by choices rather than battles. Word had spread across the Concord and beyond it. A human had not only bonded, but endured. More importantly, he had remained human. The first Earth delegation arrived aboard a silver diplomatic vessel that hummed with nervous restraint. Generals, scientists, and envoys stepped onto Aurelian soil with rigid posture and guarded eyes. They had read reports, but belief came slowly. Elias met them without armor, wearing the simple woven mantle of the Concord. Some recognized him instantly. Others stared as if seeing a ghost who had chosen another sky. "You were listed as missing in action," one envoy said, voice tight. Elias nodded calmly. "I was lost to war and found by peace." The Aurelians did not hide their customs. They spoke openly of the bonds, the children, the future they were building. There was no shame in truth here. Earth's representatives struggled with the concept. They asked about coercion, power imbalance, and sovereignty. Every question was answered patiently by matriarch Seraphil herself. "Consent is not a clause," she said. "It is the law beneath all laws." Elias watched, understanding form slowly. Humans were unused to civilizations that survived by cooperation rather than domination. Yet something in the presence of Aurelian children softened even the hardest stares. A crisis came without warning. A distant star system collapsed into instability, releasing radiation waves that threatened both Concord space and human colonies. For the first time since the war, fear returned to the council halls. The Aurelians had knowledge. Humans had adaptability and speed. Neither alone could solve the crisis in time. Elias was called not as a soldier, but as a translator of instincts. He spoke of urgency without panic, of unity without surrender. Joint fleets formed, not under one banner but many. Aurelian navigators synchronized with human pilots. Different minds moving toward a single purpose. In the heart of the mission, Elias stood beside Lyra and Malith, aboard a command vessel grown from light and alley. He felt the familiar tension of risk, but also the unfamiliar comfort of shared fate. When systems failed, humans improvised. When chaos surged, Aurelians stabilized energy flows with calm precision. Together, they rewrote the outcome. The radiation storm was contained. Worlds were spared. No songs were sung at first, only silence heavy with relief. Afterward, something shifted permanently. Earth no longer saw the Concord as alien saviors or judges. The Concord no longer saw humanity as a fragile experiment. They saw partners. In the years that followed, Elia's role changed again. He became a mentor to hybrid children who asked questions without borders. Why do humans fight so much? Why do Aurelians live so long? He answered honestly. Because fear teaches badly and patience teaches slowly. Some children carried human laughter, quick and loud. Others carried Aurelian stillness, deep and luminous. All carried curiosity, like a shared inheritance. Elias bonded less often now. Not because the need was gone, but because balance had been restored. The court order had fulfilled its purpose and gently faded into tradition. One evening, Malith joined him beneath the stars. She sensed his thoughts before he spoke. "You wonder if your path was chosen or merely accepted," she said. Elias smiled softly. All soldiers follow orders, but few are allowed to redefine them. When his hair began to gray, Aurelians marked the moment with quiet reverence. Mortality was not weakness to them. It was intensity. They recorded his stories not as legend, but as guidance. A reminder that survival does not require erasure of self. On the anniversary of the first bond, a new covenant was signed. No longer about reproduction or crisis, but about shared stewardship of life. Elias placed his mark beside Seraphil and the human envoy. 3 signatures glowing briefly before settling into permanence. As night fell, he walked through the city once more. Children ran past him laughing, calling him by name rather than title. Above them, the stars watched silently. Elias understood then that legacy was not written in bloodlines alone, but in the courage to choose connection over fear. Again and again. And somewhere between Earth and the Concord, a future unfolded not because it was ordered, but because it was chosen. Time on the Concord did not march, it drifted like light through water. Elias felt it most strongly in the mornings when the city awakened slowly, towers brightening as if stretching from sleep, voices carrying without urgency. He lived now in a dwelling grown at the edge of the city where crystal met open sky, a place offered not by decree but affection. From there he could see the violet ocean and on clear cycles, the distant curve of Earth's trade routes cutting silver lines through space. The war that had once defined him felt like a story told by another person. Yet its lessons remained etched into his bones. Protect life, stand when others fall, choose with intention. The hybrid children visited often, some walking, some floating awkwardly on early attempts at controlled levitation. They brought questions sharper than any tribunal inquiry. Why did humans once fear us? Why did Aurelians think they were alone? Elias answered slowly, knowing that haste simplified truth too much. Because fear makes distance feel safer than understanding, and loneliness can pretend to be strength. One child, small and radiant with eyes like twin dawns, asked the question that lingered longest. Did the court save us, or did you? Elias knelt to their level, smiling with the weariness of someone who had carried too many titles. No one is saved by a single being, he said. We save each other by choosing not to turn away. As years passed, the Concord expanded its teaching halls. not to spread doctrine, but to exchange perspective. Humans taught improvisation and emotional adaptability. Aurelians taught patience and long vision. Elias often sat in the back during these sessions, content to listen. Leadership had become something quieter to him, a presence rather than a command. Malith remained close, though their bond had evolved into something less ceremonial and more enduring. They shared long silences filled with understanding rather than words. She once told him that Aurelians believed love matured into stillness. On Earth, myths began to circulate. Stories of the human who fathered stars. Elias laughed gently when he heard them, knowing how poorly legend captured reality. He was not a conqueror, not a savior, not even a symbol in his own eyes. He was a participant in a long conversation between worlds. A final challenge came quietly, without alarms or fleets. A philosophical divide emerged between younger Aurelians and older councils. Questions about identity, continuity, and whether hybridization would one day erase what had been. Elias was invited, not summoned, to speak. The chamber was smaller than the original tribunal hall, but the weight of the moment was heavier. He spoke without prepared words. Every civilization fears change, he said. But stagnation is a slower extinction, one that feels comfortable until it is complete. He reminded them that Aurelians had already changed. By choosing consent over survival at any cost. By trusting an outsider. Identity is not preserved by isolation, he continued. It is preserved by values carried forward, even in new forms. The chamber listened, not because he was human or honored, but because his life embodied the question they were asking. When the session ended, no vote was taken. The Concord preferred reflection to immediacy. But Elias felt the tension ease, like a knot loosened rather than cut. Later that cycle, Lyra joined him on the balcony. You know, she said, we once thought our decline was biological. Now we understand it was cultural. Elias nodded, watching distant stars pulse softly. Life fails when it forgets how to adapt without losing compassion. His body aged faster than the city around him. Lines deepened. Joints stiffened, breath shortened slightly. The Aurelians treated these changes with reverence rather than pity. When he could no longer spar in training halls, children helped him walk. When his voice weakened, rooms leaned closer to hear him. Mortality made him precious, not fragile. One evening, as the sky shifted through rare hues of gold and indigo, Elias felt a certainty settle within him. Not fear, not sorrow, but completion. He called Malith, Lyra, and several others who had shared his path. They gathered not in ceremony, but comfort, sitting together beneath the open sky. I will not be here forever, he said calmly. But what we built does not require me to continue. Malith placed her hand in his, light meeting warmth. You were never the foundation, she said. You were the opening. In his final address to the Concord, transmitted quietly to Earth as well, Elias spoke of choice one last time. No order, no prophecy, no crisis can replace daily decisions. Treat difference as dialogue, not threat. When he rested afterward, the city dimmed its lights instinctively. Not in mourning, but respect. Elias Vaughan passed as he had lived among the stars. Without spectacle, without fear, surrounded by lives that continued. The Concord did not build a monument. They planted a living archive, a garden of memory grown from crystal and soil. Each branch carried stories rather than names. On Earth, the myths softened into history, and history into guidance. Children of many worlds played beneath alien suns, unaware of how fragile the path once was. They inherited not his blood alone, but his lesson. That the greatest legacy is not survival at any cost. but the courage to choose connection, even when the universe is vast and unknown.